Please welcome Dr. Ali Etemad and the group. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our AI debate with the title, Are We There Yet? Is AI Discovering New Frontiers or Wandering in Circles? AI has been through many ups and downs, as we all know, and where we've had, moments of huge excitement, and that's been followed by long AI winters, as we call them, when progress has really slowed down and interest and funding faded. So it's always worth it to pause and ask ourselves, are we truly moving forward, or are we just repeating the same ideas over and over again? The recent wave of AI with the introduction of ChatGPT and other models, whether generative or otherwise, has really sparked a modern-day gold rush. On one hand, we have these AI systems that now can do things that we couldn't even imagine a few years ago. Some even seem, at least, to be able to pass the Turing test. Almost every single company in every single discipline seems to be adding AI to their stack in some capacity. And really, AI has started to change the way we work and live. On the other hand, everyone seems to be building AI applications, right? Everyone is using large language models or generative models of some sort, like pieces of Lego, to build agentic pipelines. And very few people, understandably, seem to be interested in fundamental AI research anymore. Fundamental and core challenges, things like causality, like reasoning, generalization, bias, understanding, scalability of models, these are really underexplored and no longer very popular because the quick wins seem to be in building applications with these AI models that resemble agents. And of course, AI is not just about language, it's also about computer vision, robotics, reinforcement learning, neuroscience, inspired AI, and countless other areas. But they all kind of face the same core fundamental challenges, things like causality, generalization, reasoning, so on and so forth. So tonight, we ask, is AI truly discovering new frontiers, or are we just wandering in circles and basically repeating history, but at a scale? So I'm very excited to moderate this debate tonight. On this panel, on my left, we have Dr. Dolatabadi from York University. She is with the Department of Health and Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. Tom Hoddes is a staff machine learning engineer at Waymo, and formerly he was at Google DeepMind and Google Research. He's also a Queen's alumnus. I'm glad to have him back here. On my right, and on the left, we have, they will be arguing for this question, saying that AI is indeed discovering new grounds and not wandering in circles. They have been assigned to that position, and we will figure out at the end whether there's any plot twist there or not. On my right, we have Dr. Lee St. James, Managing Director of the Urban Robotics Foundation and Vice President of Service Robots and Cognitive Automation, and Dr. Gunnar Bloom, where he's a professor in computational neuroscience and Vice Director of the Connected Minds program. Okay, so the way we're going to do this debate is we're going to do 5 minutes of arguments, opening remarks from each participant, and then we'll do a back and forth debate for another 20. Maybe we'll sneak in a question from the audience in there, and then we'll do a closing remarks. Let's do the opening vote now. So keep in mind, we can determine success based on two things. One is the absolute number, like the actual percentage total, or the change in the percentage. So that's something you might want to consider. It's a question of how many people each side could convince to change their positions. So keep that in mind. Okay, so far, Seems like there's optimism around AI making real progress with around 60%.
Not as much as the national strategy, though.
No, definitely not as much as a national strategy for robotics.
We have work to do.
But there's also more room. Okay, so let's keep it going. Just to determine who will go first, I have a coin. I want to make this super fair. So heads or tails?
Tails.
Okay, heads. So you guys start. And yeah, I'll keep time. And
Okay, thanks, Ali, and thanks to all the organizers for having me. It's great to be here. So I actually think that progress has been so fast that it's easy to forget where we were just 3 years ago when ChatGPT was released and LLMs went mainstream. So I'm going to start with a personal experience of how I use AI in my life and how I witnessed its progression. So in late 2022, when I first got my hands on LLMs, I was impressed, but they were more flashy demos than usable products. It was wrong too often. I couldn't really trust it, even for something as basic as info retrieval, looking up an API call, or simple coding tasks. It took me too much time to correct its mistakes or figure out if it was wrong. They did improve with scale, but they still weren't good enough. They weren't like over that utility trust threshold for me to use them and work them into my everyday work and life. I have a pretty high bar, I think, for that, for using technology. Given that scaling laws were logarithmic, which was known at the time, and autoregressive has known flaws such as compounding errors and hallucinations, I figured, I think this is as far as we're going to get. I was pretty skeptical that we would, get a massive leap forward without another breakthrough that I didn't think would come anytime soon. But the next generation of models proved me wrong. Suddenly, I could trust these models to code simple things for me. I would look up topics to fill some gaps in my knowledge. It was particularly useful for studying for this debate. And I began to trust the models more, but understand their limits. Nothing more than a few lines of code or looking up an API call. But then it moved beyond those limits about a year later. And I saw them solving more difficult problems for me, such as I had this mind-blowing moment where it wrote a perfectly functional unit test for a complex 3D transformation that would have taken me days to fully understand. Thanks to agents, I can now kick off a task, tell it to write and run unit tests, walk away from my desk, grab a coffee, and come back and review something that more often than not works out of the box, maybe a few tweaks. Meanwhile, there have been advances in multimodal models with realistic video and audio generation and real-time conversational models that we can talk to like humans. In the physical world, autonomous vehicles are available to the public in multiple cities around the world and expanding rapidly. We even have interactive simulated worlds with models like Genie, where you can prompt it with an image or text and create a whole world that you can interact with through an action space that is learned latently. And the cost to run all these models has dropped by several orders of magnitude. But all of this didn't come just out of thin air. It came from huge innovations in 3 different areas: modeling, engineering, and scaling. In modeling, we had architecture shifts from pure autoregressive text models to multimodal models trained with a mixture of tasks. From long context, we went from about 2,000 tokens or words, the size of an email roughly, to being able to understand multiple whole documents, papers, small books, and small code bases. Chain of thought and thinking models really changed the game in terms of reasoning and reducing hallucinations by refining answers more, giving models the ability to refine their answers. We have a mixture of expert models to scale inference using sparsity and conditioned inference. On the engineering side, so all these modeling improvements, were preceded by engineering. I think that's an area that we can't overlook. So, from like zero sharding techniques like Zero and Megatron, so that we can fit more model on fewer chips, to specialized attention, like flash attention or page attention, to enable long context. And then there's the idea of scaling, right? So I think there's an idea that, okay, we're not really improving anything, we're not having any new breakthroughs, we're just throwing money and chips at the problem. But that's not true, right? Like, everything breaks at scale. You can't just make a model bigger and expect it to perform better. What you end up running into is training instabilities and other issues. So we've had to come up with new normalization strategies. There's a field working on initialization with things like mu-param. And we have new optimizers that converge faster and require less tuning, which is incredibly important, since we can't just like run tons of hyperparameter sweeps like we could for smaller models. So in closing, you might say wandering in circles. I say spiral of innovation.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the opposing team.
Thank you. Just want to clarify, I'm Lee St. James. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a PhD. I do have an MBA from INSEAD, but I've actually got lots of work experience around this place, and I actually lead webinars and seminars around embracing AI, but more for commercial application. And so I need to learn a whole new vocabulary after listening to you, Tom. But I do want to say that, from my perspective, I stand firmly on this side that AI is wandering in circles, and I actually think that that may be a good thing. And so here's why. I think that we want to frame the question about, like, well, what is a new frontier and where does that go? But think about, AI is impressive, but it's not intelligent. We've built systems that can write essays and generate images and mimic conversation, but they still fail at basic reasoning, common sense, and understanding context. So in many of the areas that impact people in their daily lives, we need to think about, what is our North Star? What do we want the AI to do? And from my perspective, we need to go back to some basics and some foundational elements. So, we keep revisiting the same ethical issues around bias, misinformation, surveillance, privacy. These problems aren't new. They're not being solved either. So you've got people like Joshua Bengio saying unrestrained agentic AI systems are already beginning to exhibit tendencies towards self-preservation and deception. And yet the race continues faster, not safer. It's like, well, maybe we need to not necessarily slow down, but just circle back and try different approaches. Canada is a global leader in AI. We've invested in research, launched ethical frameworks like the Montreal Declaration, and supported top minds through programs like CFAR AI chairs. But even our pioneers, Bengio, Jeffrey Hinton, Sutton, are sounding the alarm. They're not celebrating progress. They're calling for a reset. So if we can't solve the basics, then we're not discovering new frontiers. We're just driving faster in circles. I love the analogy of spiral of innovation, so maybe that's a hint, Tom, in terms of where your true allegiance lies. Back in the 2024 AI debate, Josh referred to Ted Chiang's forklift analogy, and I looked it up because I didn't know what his analogy was, and I want to share that with you all. He says, using ChatGPT to complete assignments is like bringing a forklift into the weight room. You will never improve your cognitive fitness that way. So the analogy highlights the idea that while AI can make tasks easier, like lifting heavy weights, it bypasses the very process that builds intellectual strength. So what is our, as we were talking about yesterday, our North Star? What would success look like for AI? Academic excellence does not equal economic or financial success or societal benefit. So despite billions in investment and decades of research, the AI community often finds itself chasing the same problems with new tools rather than solving them. In Canada and beyond, we're seeing a cycle of hype, incremental progress, and repeated ethical concerns, suggesting that AI may be wandering in circles rather than boldly discovering new frontiers, to me, is not necessarily a bad thing. So that's probably why Gunnar and I decided to sit on this side of the stage today. When you think about some of the comments, I'm just going to share a few more to reiterate this point around, Geoffrey Hinton. He says, I think we should think of AI as an intellectual equivalent of a backhoe. It will be much better than us at a lot of things, but of course you can't misuse it. AI breakthroughs are often overstated. We hear about human-level intelligence or sentient machines, but most systems still struggle with basic reasoning, context, and reliability. So when I think about I'm just going to sort of scooch forward here in my notes to deliver a bit of a personal anecdote. So how many of you use Waze or Google Maps or something when you're trying to get somewhere? Most of us, right? So I live in the Niagara region, and I was driving into Toronto on my way to get here. I had some meetings in Toronto, and I know Toronto pretty well because I lived there for a long time, and the Waze at the last minute, had me, change direction. It wanted me to turn left on Lakeshore down by Ontario Place, and I'm like, what? Why would I do that? And I did a little, screen grab to make sure, where's it heading me? And it wanted me to go in circles to come back and go onto the Gardiner through another direction. I'm like, oh no, I am not going in circles today. I'm going straight through. So I think that AI does sometimes lead us in circles that are negative, but really, I think that you have to have the human intelligence and the experience from your lives to know when to trust it and when not to, and that's really why I stand on the side of AI going in circles is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I disagree with 2 points. Let me take these one by one. First, let me start with a very clear statement. AI is not wandering in circles. It expands the very map of human knowledge, and all the points that are claimed by Hinton, Joshua, these are reflecting the fact that AI is as intelligent as human and can become as intelligent and also more intelligent than human, and also the fact that AI is an intellectual telescope. It extends our vision, so like telescope that enables us to see further in a space. When AlphaFold predicted the 3D structure of nearly every known proteins, it solved a mystery that biologists and scientists were struggling for decades. And about this so-called AI winter, AI spring, these are not true facts. These are perceptual narratives made by skeptical and conservative decision makers, policymakers, who did not want or couldn't see how AI was evolving and advancing. Also, we are not circling, AI is not circling, we are climbing. AI is finding overlooked possibilities. There are many unknowns around us. The hypothesis space is huge, and we can discover hypotheses that were previously unimaginable. Second, I strongly disagree with the claim that AI fundamentals are behind or are disappearing, that everyone is just stacking models like Lego blocks. There is no, before generative AI models, large language models, you could put a boundary between AI fundamentals and application, but now with these larger scale models, this view overlooks the deeper motion happening beneath the surface. And yes, there is noise. Not all projects are high quality, like some applications are not elegant, but this is how a progress is being made in an evolutionary experiment. We often discover the principles first through a scale, through And then we can, through experiments, and then we can formalize them. And something else that I wanted to point out is you cannot have a discovery without a little turbulence, and some boats might move against the current, but the river is flowing forward, and causality, reasoning, bias aren't being ignored. They are being explored even more rigorously than ever. And through these larger scale experimentations, data-driven experimentations, through these data that are like, we are able to mine large amounts of data that are beyond our natural limitations. And through these mining and explorations, we can find about counterfactuals, and we can then come up with alignment theories. So in my opinion, a scale gives us an empirical lens for discovering principles that we can later go around and think about the fundamentals. So fundamental AI is not dying, it's evolving. And it lives and embedded within codes and systems. And something else that I wanted to mention, and I have my it's more about the history, and I have the notes. I always would like to make this analogy that experimentations and physics on one side, and theory, fundamentals, and math on the other side. And they've been always like applications and fundamentals, or theory and experimentations. They were co-evolving together. They've been intervened, and this is not the first time that we're talking about. We already know about phenomena like motion, gravity, electromagnetism were discovered and described empirically long before the math existed to solve them, like Newton developed mechanics before calculus was rigorous, or Maxwell, those of you who have, my background is electromagnetics, that's how I always have this example that Maxwell unified light and magnetism before vector calculus there existed. And even today, frontiers such as turbulence, other quantum gravity, like through some experiments, and basically some of them remain mathematically unresolved, but that shouldn't stop us from exploring and making applications. And in my opinion, AI stands in the same lineage.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm a neuroscientist, so I will take, or nowadays as a computational neuroscientist, people call that neuro-AI. But I'm assigned to the wandering camp, so I will take that perspective. And before getting started, I want to make a comment on the Turing test, or the fallacy of the Turing test, which is essentially that we believe that anything that passes the Turing test is intelligent, but it is not a sufficient condition. And in fact, like, I remember a time when I thought ELIZA, does anyone remember ELIZA? So that was a rule-based artificial intelligence. I was very convinced that that passed the Turing test. No, I never did the test myself, but it felt very real. So maybe more importantly than just this particular Turing test is the fact that even neuroscientists don't know what intelligence actually is. In fact, we can't define it. In a certain way, this is sort of like a goal where the posts keep moving. So calling something intelligent, and when we talk about AI, we often talk about AGI. I think there's a problem here. And a Turing test in particular has not even been designed by a neuroscientist, but by a computer scientist. So that, I just wanted to briefly mention that this actually highlights the need for multiple disciplines to come together to answer those questions, to work on deep questions of intelligence or artificial intelligence. All right, that was my opening comment, I guess. Now, I want to make 3 arguments towards the wandering in circles. So again, as a neuroscientist, I want to say that neuroscience demonstrates that meaningful intelligence is deeply tied to a system's embodiment, its ability to sense, act, and interact with the physical world, learning and adapting in real time. So that's like one-shot learning, for example, especially in unpredictable or fundamentally new situations. So that's speaking towards generalization and robustness, something that current AI systems are really bad at. That's my first argument. Second argument. Now, despite massive investments, and tying back to the Turing test, by the way, despite massive investments and increased knowledge about the brain, there's still a lack of unified principles about intelligence, or what makes us intelligent, that can be directly abstracted and then implemented into artificial intelligence systems. And as a neuroscientist, I would argue that scaling current architectures is not sufficient to overcome this gap between the principles and actual intelligence. So what we really need is fundamentally new, potentially brain-inspired approaches if we're talking about intelligence. Now finally, if AI development turns in circle, is there at least, could there be at least, so the AI, like algorithms, I mean, could there be at least a benefit of the current state of AI for science? And I'm going to take the example of neuroscience. So I think AI models permeate neuroscience nowadays. AI models outperform, in many areas, all other traditional or like former models, so they do what much better. So you would say, yay, win for AI, right? But the problem is that while the models fit the data better, we don't understand the models. So effectively, we still don't understand the brain, and we have just kicked the can of understanding how the brain works down the road. And so, as such, we have made no progress. We've been turning in circles. We've just used a lot of compute. That's all. That's my three positions.
Okay, so we heard the opening arguments. So if there's anything that you want to rebut against each other, anyone want to start? Yeah, I'd like to go for it.
Thanks. So I just want to say I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think it goes to prove our side of the debate, though. So, so Lee, I really liked what you said about, going in circles is a good thing. I agree. I think that that's sort of how scientific progress is made. So thank you for that. Yeah, I think the spirit of the debate is whether we're making progress or not. And so I think that that's really just going to show that we are making progress. But I wanted to touch on something that you said about how we have all these new problems coming up, and I think that's also another sign of making progress. With every new solution, you get new problems, and that just means you've discovered another frontier that you need to solve, right? So I think one example of this was the internet, right? The internet was this massively impactful thing that's incredibly useful. I think no one can deny that. Also, no one can deny the problems it created, right? And I think that one of the things we've seen with AI is it solves some of the problems that the internet created. Like, the original internet was great for finding information. Now it's just a sea of garbage. At least that's what I think. And I find it much more enjoyable and useful to get information out of one of these AI systems. And it happens to be trustworthy, sometimes even more trustworthy than what's on the internet because it's able to aggregate. You also mentioned that these AI systems can be used as a crutch, and so we're not learning anything anymore. I would say the opposite is actually true. I can understand that point of view, but what I have found is that not only do these systems help me to learn. I mean, I also don't have a PhD. I'm one of the few in my field without a PhD, so I've had to kind of bootstrap my own knowledge. But it also challenges me to tackle harder problems. because I have such powerful tools. And I found that it's even harder for me to like keep up with what I can accomplish. My brain is having a hard time keeping up with understanding and thinking what I have to accomplish. So it's actually pushing me forward. I have some more comments on what Gunnar said, but maybe I'll hand the microphone over in case anyone else wants to respond, not to hog it.
I just have one quick response to definition of intelligence, or we say that AI is intelligent. What does it mean? Even for human brain, we don't know what that means. And I agree with you 100%. But we human, we are evaluators, we are labelers, right? The way that we measure something is through the performance on the tasks. And we see that like AI does a better job for most of the tasks that are beyond our natural limits, like large volumes of data, agentic reasoning planning. And this is how we kind of, we call it downstream tasks within the AI community. So through those tasks, we label AI that, hey, AI does a better job, is more intelligent. And also the last comment that you made about neuroscience and what's happening. So let's put it AI on the side. So basically, like, we have a great scientist, we had a scientist, like Newton found something, and basically, like, we first, like, what we did again, like, as human, as evaluator, we put it in place, and it did work. And who cares about, like, okay, how it was generated? It's all about the outcome. Is it working or not?
Do you mind? A calculator also does way better than me. That doesn't mean that it's like intelligent. But maybe like you mentioned the fact that now all knowledge is at your feet. But AI systems, like we're talking, I guess, large language models mostly here, they confabulate quite a bit. And now I'm facing the problem that I don't know anymore what's right or wrong, what's true and what's not true. And in fact, I see this more as a downward spiral, that the information that humanity has amassed over a long time is getting destroyed by the fact that these artificial systems arbitrarily create information, and the original sources more and more disappear. And I think that's a huge risk and potentially actually a backwards movement instead of a forwards movement.
Cheers. I wish everybody could just applaud to that one. That was good. Oh my goodness. So I'm thrilled, Tom, that you agree with me that we're going around in circles, because honestly, I mean, I live in a world, I work in a technology solutions provider, we're a systems integrator, you know, so my full-time role, and I'm constantly looking at the agile methodology. We deploy technology, we gather feedback from the client, and we, you know, optimize it, and we, you know, there's like this whole 5-stage, you know, standard process that we use. So yes, to me, circles are a good thing, but to me, the question was much broader in terms of what are the next frontiers in AI, and, you know, should we be continuing to expand those frontiers? Because I think that's what the National AI Strategy is all about right now. And yet, what we really need to do is to go back to the basics and look at the fundamentals, because yes, you know, things like the internet have, you know, in many ways, you know, changed us for the better, but there are huge risks and huge issues. So it's like we're not looking enough at how is that impacting society. And you see the, you know, the not just the geopolitical, but the socioeconomic situation that we're in globally. It's like we need to deal more from a humanistic perspective. And so while I love, you know, science and robotics and all the things that are associated with STEM, and you know, education, I think is so important that we bring in some of those humanities and some of those other aspects and collaborate more effectively. And so to me, that's what I call circling back. It's just like, you know, we still have so many issues around our ethical use of these new technologies. And if we don't address them, who will? So, there are lots and lots of our, global competitors, I use that term gently, who, may, be, ramping up their capabilities in nefarious ways. We need to be prepared, yes. So, I applaud some of the, announcements recently about, investments in defense and all that sort of stuff. But what are we going to do, and how can we leverage the resources, the limited resources that we have as a country, to make sure that all of the developments that we do invest in through that national strategy and through the work on those new frontiers really will make a difference. And to me, there just simply hasn't been enough focus on the basics and the foundations. And so that's really why I want to encourage you to think that going around in circles right now with AI is a really good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. So, so again, like back to this comment that I claim, basically, that I made about like we human, we are like at the center, and we want to basically make all these evaluations, say that, okay, AI is circling or not. But here's the thing. So there are many unknown around us, beyond our capabilities, capacities, actually frontiers that we have no idea. So we judge AI's capabilities for discovering new frontiers based on the frontiers that we already have in mind, like material discovery, genomics, biology. But AI is not just discovering new frontiers, it's expanding what counts as discovery itself. And we are no longer asking machines to think like us, we are learning to think bigger through them. So AI is more like a partner, and the same way that, like, again, as an analogy, like the James Webb Telescope is working. So there are many things out there that we have no idea. So we capture those informations, and then we reflect on those. Okay, what are these images? The what, the how, the why.
I actually want to pose a question or a challenging point for each side and see what the responses are. So for your side, how can we look at all the progress that AI has made and claim that we're still running in circles? I mean, if you look at all the jobs that are being automated, or if you've sat in a Tesla with self-driving 10, 15 years ago, no one could have thought that this would be possible. Cars are now fully autonomous, right? We had several Nobel Prizes given to AI scientists. So I want to understand your perspective on that and how we can still claim that there's not progress being made when we have Nobel Prizes being given out, self-driving cars all around us, and things like that. So that's a question that I want to pose for your side, and I want to also give the question for their side and see if that sparks a debate. For your side, I mean, there was a keynote talk by Ilya Sutskever, the co-founder of OpenAI, last year. And in that talk, he said, basically, we've used all the data in the history of humankind. And he actually predicted that progress is going to slow down because there's no more data. We've used up all the data. And so the claim is that a lot of this progress wasn't really progress from a fundamental perspective. It was just progress as a result of more compute and data thrown at the same algorithms. So I want to get your perspective on that and see how that is, how you can put that, and have that and claim that we're actually making massive progress as opposed to basically using the same algorithms just at a larger scale due to more data and compute. So.
Okay. So I guess in part that is so first of all, you have assigned us to decide. But it is also a time scale sort of like question, right? Have we made progress in the last 100 years? Yes, we got computers, we got so obviously there has been a certain amount of progress. Have we made progress in the last 10 years? There has been like one breakthrough, I guess. in particular, one application in particular. But has there been really fundamental progress? And I would still argue that that is mostly no. So one of the indicators of that, in my mind, is the fact that pretty much everyone nowadays uses AI for various reasons, right? It's a cool thing to do. That's where the funding is. The funding agencies pump, like as soon as you put like something plus AI, you're much more likely to get funding, essentially. If you look at the actual tangible applications, the economic value of AI, that is much more questionable whether there's any at all. There's like studies on programmers, software engineers that have essentially asked if you have access to a co-pilot versus not, which one is most efficient? And it was sort of like, for experts, it was definitely, the experts are actually better without it. For novices, there might be some form of a benefit. So again, it's not as clear-cut there, even in that particular use case scenario, which in my mind, I would argue is one of the strongest one, is the co-pilot aspect, where you have like a very structured task to be solved. Even there, this is questionable. So I'm not sure whether we're running in circles here. I don't see the output that matches the investment and the hype. And I think so in a certain part that comes back to the AI winter aspect. I don't think that was a policy decision. It was an overhyped consequence. It was that AI researchers back in time promised that we would solve AGI essentially in the next 10 years. And that promise never happened. And at some point, obviously the funding agency pulled the plug, for probably the right reason. Or you can argue whether that was right or wrong. But anyways, like it was essentially, it wasn't the policymakers were wrong, it was the scientists that were wrong and overpromising. And my worry is that we're in the same kind of situation right now.
Indeed, and when you look at the autonomous vehicles in particular, I'm just going to pick up on that example, because I know that Tom works at Waymo. I think that we don't know how we're actually going to deploy them fully at scale. So yes, there are small-scale projects being deployed in certain cities around the world, and I'm working on some in the Middle East right now, and have initial conversations underway with a couple of American cities. But so in our work with the Urban Robotics Foundation, what we are focused on is trying to encourage cities, regions, provinces or states and national governments to understand how complicated it's going to be when these devices are being used at scale. And so we started with a focus in 2019 on public area mobile robots, or I think Josh was talking earlier about outdoor robots. There's all kinds of different words, but the idea is any kind of autonomous device that's used around bystanders that they're not trained, they don't know what to expect. We heard in the keynote this morning about human-robot interaction and all the fundamental research that's going on there around how do we ensure that human beings know what the devices are doing or intend, and how the devices know how to interpret how people interact with them. Add to that what happens when you get to an intersection and you have to deal with cars, some with drivers in them and some without drivers in them. And then you add in cyclists, and you add in, all these people on scooters, and the orchestration problems are, completely not ready for deployment at scale. So maybe that's a new frontier where AI will make a difference, but it's not there yet. And that's where, if we think about, what needs to be done, some of those fundamental, again, I go back to, maybe you think of, doing AI research on governance and ethics as a new frontier. I don't consider that a new frontier. I consider that a foundation for responsible AI development, right? So from my perspective, we need to think about, let's go back to the basics and involve more stakeholders in that preparation for allowing these technologies to come forward in a way that is actually going to work for us. If you think about, this may not quite connect with the audience here, but I'm just thinking about some of the horrific examples of how ChatGPT has guided young people to commit suicide. And I'm like, could you not have predicted that? That would be misused somehow? Like, is there a way to stop the misuse before it happens and the tragedies that occur? And the same type of risks that are associated, I'm not saying like avoid all risks, we can't avoid all risks, we have to, try things at scale, which is why I love the fact that companies like Waymo are out there and they're testing and they're pilot testing and they're developing things and they're doing it in an agile way. And so whether you call it a circle or a spiral, I don't care, but going around in circles is really important because we don't know what we don't know. And by the time you get to the end result, you need to have done a lot of experiential practice, and that's really where Gunnar's point comes in, that what really generates intelligence is that experiential point of it, right? I mean, I have a 17-year-old son who's just starting university this fall, and he's listening to speakers come, and he doesn't have a clue what he's going to do when he's an engineer, out in the real world. He's trying to listen and learn, but he won't know until he's been through the type of training that so many of you have had, which is like live through the labs and learn and experience and try and make mistakes with managed risks, right? There's not going to be going out there because you can just, but I just used, an LLM and I know what I'm doing now. No, you don't. You still have so much to learn. And that's my point of the importance of going around in circles.
I have so many things to say. I'm probably going to lose my train of thought. So first I'll respond to Ali's question. First I'll respond to Ali's question. So, I think it was, the spirit of the question was that we spent the last few years sort of exhausting this abundance of data that, enabled all of these capabilities, and that we didn't really have any breakthroughs along the way. We just scaled up the same techniques. So I think I already touched on this, but it was not as simple as just, now we have all this data. We've had this data for a long time. We weren't able to fully make use of it until very recently. And along the way, we had checkpoints where you can point to and see the improvements that were made, like thinking models, use data in a very different way. I think even if we have exhausted all the data, that doesn't necessarily mean that progress is going to slow down. It just means we have new problems. We're confronted with new problems. So data curation, I think, is one of the biggest fields of research right now. And how can we, balance our data? How can we sample good quality data? I think these are some of the really closely guarded secrets of the big labs is what data do they use, what data they actually use, and how is it mixed together. So that's how I feel about that. And I want to respond also to some of the things that Gunnar said, since I picked on Lee in the first round. Gunnar, you said something that AGI was promised but not delivered. And I agree with that. That is true. However, I think that is just distracting from the real progress that we've made. Yes, it remains to be seen what the economic impact of AI is, but it's still early, and there's clear signs of value, right? There's clear products. I'm a firm believer in if you create a good product that people find value in, the money will come. And so we see that already. We see it with autonomous vehicles that I think are deployed at a bigger scale than a lot of people might realize, going to sort of what Lee was talking about. I think we, where I live now in Seattle, we don't have them. And a lot of people don't realize that in the cities that do have them, they're just a normal everyday thing now. But going back to sort of the question of AGI, I think people can't even agree on what AGI is. So it's not really I don't think it's the most important thing in how we can measure progress. Let's measure progress by looking at like the real problems that we have and how many of those have we solved, right? Like we now have models that can not only code for you and drive you around, but you know, they're winning the International Math Olympics at, you know, they're winning the gold medal standard at that. So like we're clearly making progress, we're clearly providing value in areas that matter. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a lot to, it's more difficult for me now because I have to answer many questions. So back to Ali's comment about what has been discussed last year about that all data has been used, the compute, and now pretty much like we are at the top. But actually this claim is a clear indication that AI has been rising and evolving over the past many years. And it doesn't mean that it has been, there's a plateau or it's gonna stop. Or like it's just about fundamental research and no application can be done. It's more about, okay, so how can we, so far we've been focusing only on, let's say like non-agent architecture, but moving forward, again, AI is evolving, is rising. Now we want to focus more on agentic systems, agents, not necessarily more data, not necessarily more compute. But there's still a lot to be done, and every single step is helping to improve AI models. But also like the other claim that has been made about kind of economy, there wasn't really ROI, return of investment. So I'm curious to know that like how economy was measured. In my opinion, in economy, there has been a lot of, some of them are very direct, some of them are very indirect. There are actually like some application areas that kind of AI can still do more. Also about this so-called winter term, again, like policy makers, not necessarily government policy makers. It could be giant tech companies, it could be the ones that could benefit from seeing that some of the, basically in the market that AI is not really improving, which somehow has slowed down some of the local infrastructure and investments. But during that time, something that really is interesting for us to observe is that ChatGPT didn't just come out suddenly. They've been working on it. They put a lot of effort into it during the times that people were not happy with AI. But companies showed that they put a lot of effort, data, compute, scaling, experiments into them, and they showed the outcomes. So yeah, so my point is that all these are mainly like distractions and which somehow hide the fact that AI is moving and is not circling in wonder.
I'm just going to add one quick example. So facial recognition, as an example, was controversial in 2018, and it still is today. So the Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI was signed in 2018, but many of its principles remain unfulfilled or ignored in practice. So I won't deny that AI is making progress, but I think the whole point from my perspective is to figure out what's missing, because I think the attention is on the wrong things in terms of trying to find new frontiers. I think there are areas that are well understood that aren't specifically related to the modeling or the there were three elements, sorry, that you mentioned earlier, Tom, the scaling and the efficiency. And it's really about, without solving some of these foundational problems, we risk building unstable and dangerous systems.
Okay. Okay, so I think now's a good time to do the, let's do a question. So does anyone in the audience have a question that could be posed to both camps?
Sure. Sorry, I got the mic, so. and just to say, my vote is still up for grabs. So I guess my question to Tom and Ellen, if I gave you all the compute power in the world, what problem would you guys choose to solve? And on the other side, for Gunnar and Lee, if you had all the compute power, what problem do you think we could never solve with AI?
Really nice question. Okay. For both. Your question was, if you had all the compute, what problem would you solve? You could solve, and for you, you could not. Would you solve? So yours is what would you, yours is what you could not.
Mine's easy, autonomous driving.
Which, by the way, has been 2 years out for 15 years now.
Go to San Francisco, or Phoenix, or Los Angeles, or one of the other cities that it currently is in.
I know. Trying to take my side here. But it's still not everywhere around, which was promised. Anyways. What problem would we not be able to solve with all the data in the world? With all the compute in the world, sorry, not all the data, the big distinction. I think we can't solve any problem without the appropriate data to start with, and without the right questions. And one of the issues, I think, is maybe like going away a little bit from the stance I'm supposed to take, is that we have this powerful new tool, and we still haven't quite figured out what to do with it, it seems. In the same way as in neuroscience, we have an organ that is super complex, and neuroscientists have just sort of like woken up to the fact that it's not a simple organ, and you can't just like say like this particular brain area does X and this particular brain area does Y. It's just untrue. And so all the textbooks in neuroscience are sort of like garbage. But that's the questions that we're used to in science. We're like, okay, is the sun green? Well, let's measure it. Well, turns out, no. Simple question, simple answer. That doesn't work for complex systems. And we don't have the right tool, the right questions yet, the right intuitions yet to ask the right questions. And that's a tremendous challenge, I think, across many sciences, not just neuroscience.
I'll offer kind of a off-the-wall, maybe provocative answer to that, which is world peace. So if we were able to, as Yoshua Bengio, who's one of Canada's AI pioneers recently, has shifted his focus to more brain-like learning models. And so I'm kind of actually going to support Gunnar's point here that we really don't understand how the brain works, and if we could use AI to do that, then maybe we could, and this may be kind of like verging on social engineering, which I'm not really, I don't want to go down that path, but the idea of how do you prevent people from going to war? How do you encourage people to be peaceful, to be kind to each other? And how do you have people be, fair and equitable and loving and kind to each other? Just here I am, the bleeding heart liberal of the audience, and I just want to say that's what I would do. If I had, my wish, world peace. There you go.
Okay, that's you have a...
Mine is short. So I do AI for health, so if I have all the compute, and compute is my everyday challenge, so I would use it toward that.
Okay. Closing remarks. We started with your camp, so let's this time start with your camp.
So this is about the debate, not my position yet, right? Yeah, I know. So I think the one thing I want to add maybe to the discussion we've been having is that it's very easy with nowadays AI tools to get okay performing models, behavior, whatever it is. But to really make them useful and implement them in processes and whatever, solving healthcare issues, self-driving, et cetera, it's these last few percent points that we need to get right. And that's the hardest part. And we keep turning in circles there because we don't ever quite get them right, it seems, or we're running out of patience because we want sort of like this instant gratification that ChatGPT promises, right? You just type the question, you want the answer right away. And in that sense, I would say we are running in circles.
Okay, I'll go. Okay, so, sorry, getting my notes up. Okay. So, in my opinion, I think a lot of the advances, as I've said, I think a lot of the advances that we have witnessed have been obscured or distracted by the hype around AI. So my high-level advice to everybody is to just ignore the hype train and find the signal through the noise. So how are you going to do that? So to the users of AI, I say, don't write it off based on what it couldn't do last year or even, months ago. Reassess when new models are released because I think a lot of the problems that we're talking about today have actually already been solved. Like Gunnar, you mentioned AI models not being useful yet, and what can we do? They are useful. Like I find them extremely useful. I mean, how many people in this room find them extremely useful today? Thank you. So pay no mind to the hyperbole of AGI around the corner. Focus on what you can see and hear, et cetera, today. Think about what you want out of it and evaluate it for that, and then reevaluate it if it doesn't work. Reevaluate it when new models are released. I know people who have created products this way. They came up with an eval, and the old generation of models or the generation models of the time couldn't solve it, and they just kept running that over and over again until the new generation could solve it, and then it did. Also, don't be afraid of being replaced. No one knows what's going to happen. Think of AI as a tool and use it to enhance your own abilities. We're fully adaptable and capable of adopting new paradigms, as I think we've seen. To the creators of AI, I say we've come a long way, but there's still plenty of work to do across the stack. Again, I agree with a lot of the things that the opposition is saying. Some of these things, but not all of them, we still don't have a unified training paradigm, right? Something that works across any and all modalities in a single continuous stage. This would be great and should be worked on. Interpretability, I agree with Gunnar on this. We still don't understand much about how these models work. It doesn't mean they're not useful and that we're not making progress, but it would help us to understand more about them, especially when it comes to issues of safety and reining these models in. So there's this whole other field of a science of generalization that's emerging with paradigms like double descent and grokking, where we see that bigger models can generalize better despite overfitting, which kind of overturns classical bias various intuition. I think is fascinating and would be interesting to study. Data curation and balancing, as I mentioned, and just to rattle off a few more, we can always be more efficient. In order to have economic value, we need these things to be cost effective and deployable at scale. continual learning and personalization are big fields of investment right now. And network effects is something that we can, something sort of forward-looking, like what happens when we have all these different AI agents interacting with each other, and what problems do we need to worry about. So in closing, when we focus on real problems and the value and breakthroughs become clear.
I agree that when we focus on real problems, the breakthroughs become clear. And for me, that really means shifting our attention from simply, staying inside of the sort of engineering mindset or one particular robotics AI frame of reference and thinking about, a much broader stakeholder group and defining the problem. We've had many, many people on stage today and yesterday talking about the importance of defining the problem to start with and what problem are we working on. And for me, there just hasn't been enough consultation and I have a sense that we're in a rush to achieve things, which is on the one hand that's part of our culture and our sort of competitive nature, but on the other hand, the value of talking to each other and exploring different ways of thinking is so important, and especially when it comes to deploying technologies that come with such huge risks. And so from my perspective, it's really, at the end of the day, I think I've said enough to have you understand my point of view in terms of, what does it mean to be going in circles? I want us to be going in circles when it comes to AI, because the risks of not doing it are devastating. So thank you, and I'll hand it over to Ilham for the final comment.
Thank you. So don't be afraid of losing your jobs because of AI advancement. Don't lose your faith in AI's advancement. AI is evolving, but you can still take part in this race of making AI models smarter and smarter every day. So I want to take you to December 2019. So it was right before COVID or at the beginning of COVID. The company Blue Dot actually detected signs of the outbreak days before the official warning. So they mined patterns of passengers, airport data, and they found about the virus. So they gave us the signal, but because there was no system to reason, plan, and coordinate actions, the knowledge went nowhere. Basically, we didn't use the signal, we didn't know how to use it. So that's exactly why the next generation of agentic AI system matters. And we talked about scaling and agentic AI. It doesn't mean just using larger models, more data. It's all about how to design them. So we can not only process information, but we can reason, plan, and design experiments on their own. So AI is already accelerating discovery in ways we couldn't do before, finding new materials and phases of matter, design of experiments, optimizing those experiments, finding hidden patterns in neuroscience, in cell biology. So, this is what we need in Canada to be optimistic about AI, and make the way that we should think about it is that AI is a partner. It's not just a tool, it's a partner that can think with us and take us, help us to make good progress and solve some of the challenges that we are dealing with these days.
Okay, thank you everyone. Let's redo the vote and see how things have shifted. Can AI solve two-factor authentication? Please.
No one can.
Please. don't want to bias the votes. Okay, there we go. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can revote.
Wait.
I think we had some movement on the wandering circles. Thank you very much. Let's give everybody a hand. So
Okay.
Jesse, if you could switch it back, please.
So just before we take questions, does anyone want to change their position to their actual position?
Let me just start by saying I started this debate prep clearly wondering, oh no, how am I going to have a conversation about AI going around in circles? We've made such great progress in the last 20, 30 years. But the more I got into the question, the more I thought, yeah, actually going around in circles is a good thing. So there you go. It's not that I'm against AI, it's just I actually think it's a good thing to go around in circles.
So you've essentially heard one half of what I think about AI, and the other half is very much in line with what you guys said. I think it's a tremendous tool. There's tremendous potential for science, including neuroscience, including explainability in neuroscience, which is something that I'm actively working on personally in my lab. We're not there yet, but there is a whole set of possibilities that are enabled nowadays, things like foundation models that are brain aligned or brain data driven, that could enable personalized medicine, that could enable much deeper understanding of health and disease, generally speaking. What does it mean to have a disease? What does it mean to be neurodivergent? How can we intervene? So also like in terms of drug development, et cetera, et cetera. Huge, huge, huge potential. So I'm certainly using it myself in the lab. I think it's a game changer. I think for science, it's the only comparative technology that or algorithms that we have ever had is the statistics, essentially, which is sort of like a very different kind of tool set, but also was very important for the progress of science. This is potentially much more powerful, much deeper, but it also comes with a huge set of risks and problems. And I think we need to be very conscientious of them. And my hope is that more and more as a community, we engage other disciplines including, philosophy, the arts, etc., to interrogate those problems from as broad of a perspective we can possibly get, to find meaningful solutions and ensure that the development of AI and AI models is really for the benefit of society and not just a portion or worse, as in destroying society.
Do you want to switch?
I don't want to switch, but
I was afraid of it for a moment.
I do want to say that so I do stand behind this position, and this is the side I chose, and I'm relieved that I was assigned to it. But I will say that, I chose this side when Ali asked me about the debate maybe 6 months ago. I can't remember exactly when. And since then, my position has softened a little bit. I have started to see potentially diminishing returns coming out of newer models. And I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of back to my skeptical self of, okay, I do find it really useful today, but how much better is it going to get? I think a lot of the problems that we've seen solved, like coding, for example, are easier to solve, nothing's easy, easier to solve because there's a lot of data available, but also because it's like verifiable, right? Like we can train these RL models with verifiable rewards and just like, run the program, run the test, see if it works. There's a lot more harder problems out there that, I don't know when they're gonna be solved. The field of text in general was, I think the reason we saw so much advancement is because there's just so much data available on the internet. And the physical world is a lot harder.
Okay, let's take a few questions. Do you want to switch sides or anything?
No, I stay behind. It's just actually in my initial discussion with Ramsey, I guess we talked that I go against AI, and since then I've been watching all Benjio's TED Talks about AI safety and stuff. So I'm also scared, like, if these agents are becoming smarter than us, so they can take over, like what we see in Hollywood movies. And also, like, I'm also doing AI for mental health, so I'm kind of exploring about their emotional intelligence, empathy, and I was preparing stuff to talk about, to attack AI advocates about like, oh, these models, they don't have empathy, and kind of that chat GPT suicide stuff. But yeah, I'm also scared, but throughout the experiences that I have over the past 10 years in Ontario, in Canada, like, all these skepticism, they're slowing down some of the good progress that we can make, and it makes me feel sad also, like, again, the COVID example that I brought up, and also like with a family friend, a stage 4 cancer, and there's no treatment or something, like with all the advances that we see with AI. So I was hoping that we could have been doing better when it comes to doing AI for good.
Okay. Thank you. So just one quick note. Please make sure you ask a question. So it has to end with a question mark.
Thank you. Yep, over here. Thank you very much for the debate. I found it fascinating. This is more a question about 5 years from now and 10 years from now, about what we should be investing in as a country from Canada's strategic perspective. So just prefacing the question, technology can be simplified down into infrastructure, platform, and application layers. Infrastructure for AI would be data centers, platform would be the models that we use, and then applications would be all of the apps that we would put on top of that. Where do you believe, from your perspective, Canada should invest for the next 5 years and the next 10 years to have a global strategic advantage? Thanks.
Does anyone want to take that question?
Very long story short, Canada should, in my opinion, should spend time on building skill sets around scaling. I guess we are doing a great job when it comes to building fundamental AI or theory around AI or innovation. But when it comes to scaling, we still need more support, and we are not doing a great job on that. That's why we are losing talents here.
I mean, the simple answer is all three, because you can't, succeed without having the data centers, and then you kind of need to have the applications to get the, the IP and so forth. So I know it's like hard to do, easy to say, but that's, fundamentally you need all three.
I just want to say one quick thing. I would say that yes to all three and agree, but I would say maybe it's best to look forward-looking and look to problems that are rather nascent and nowhere near being solved. So I think rather than trying to play catch-up in the LLM space, I'm encouraged to see all the work being done in robotics, for example, because there's so much to do there, and it's a lot easier to start tackling something new.
So,
Where's the mic?
I have a question for Gunnar specifically. My understanding of neuroscience and AI is that they actually began to gather in some respects where Neuro was using this notion of artificial intelligence almost as a model to better understand how the human mind worked, and I might be a little off base about that. But what my question is what does AI tell us about how the human mind works? Have we learned anything more about how we think and what we know and how the brain works from AI?
So I guess the origins of neural networks come directly from the inspiration of the brain doing parallel computing in some form. But the analogy kind of stops there and has stopped there for a very long time. We're trying to get back at that with mitigated success, I would say. The biggest pieces of understanding that in mostly machine learning has allowed us or enabled us is essentially viewing the brain as a dynamical system and getting insights into those dynamics sort of from a data-driven but also then model-matched perspective. And so modern theories of how the brain works is all about dynamical systems, essentially, distributed control dynamical systems. In my mind, there's huge potential there. Huge potential for brain-aligned, if you want, AI models. In AI, people talk about world models, foundation models. Well, in neuroscience, we do too. We want to have the foundation models of the brain. How does the brain actually work? How is it that the different brain signals or the different measurements of brain activity, let's say, relate to one another? From a data-driven perspective. We don't even know that from a principles perspective necessarily. If you take like an MRI scan, for example, we have theories about where the signal comes from, but we don't know for sure, right? Or in particular, we don't know all the aspects of it. And so these kinds of approaches, I think, people are exploring them right now. And personally, I think they hold a lot of promise.
I'd like to ask a question in regard to, let alone being worried about AI becoming evil, how do we avoid or mitigate or control against the risk of the AI tool that's being designed to cure a disease? How do we avoid or keep it out of the hands of those who are going to use it for evil purposes, nefarious purposes, like developing a bacteria or a virus that it could cause more harm, right? So how do we control that? The example, 130 years ago, TNT was developed for good purposes, primarily mining, right, for demolition of rock, but it was used for horrible purposes during the First World War. So how do we, taking teachings from that experience, how do we control for that 130 years in the future?
Right up your
Yeah. Sorry, I was waiting for somebody else wanted to tackle this one. No. So fundamentally, I think that's my sort of the premise of my conversation, which is that we need to talk to each other and we need to come together as human beings to understand the risks and the rewards. And it's our government, it's our elected officials. Like we have very low public engagement. If you haven't voted, it's like whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, that's how we contribute to those conversations. And I think there are things that we can do in private enterprise and in our own communities to get involved and to make a difference. So, for example, with the Urban Robotics Foundation, it's a nonprofit organization. We just signed a collaborative agreement with Odense Robotics in Denmark. I was in Sweden and Denmark for the first time in my life in June, and I'm like, why did it take me so long to come here? This is amazing, right? And just meeting people and networking and talking to people from different cultures and different countries and realizing, we're a large country, but we only have 40 million people, and we need to collaborate with others and keep those partnerships strong and healthy. The world is dangerous, and we need to talk to each other and find ways to make it safe and wonderful. So it's just you have to be optimistic and keep moving forward. But there may be some bad actors out there doing difficult things. Does that mean that we're going to get into a spending war over, trying to create a better gun or a better, no, it's like we can't. What can we do? You have to focus on what you can do.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. This is really fantastic, and I appreciate that there's a diversity of perspectives on stage, and it's not limited to just to academics. And I'd like to ask a question sparked by Gunnar's comment on sort of the hope of the contribution to society of artificial intelligence. As a trained surveillance scholar, I'm very sensitive to the asymmetrical relations of power that can be widened by technological advancement. And I can't help but think about the digital divide. That is a term that's been kicked around for a long time. But I also like to be an optimist. And so I'd like to hear if anyone would like to share what the places or points of hope are that these technologies that we are getting may represent a chance, a positive outcome for the digital divide, for those people that are not empowered already. What have you seen out there that gives you hope that the digital divide, instead of deepening and widening, could actually be narrowed? Thank you.
I'll say one thing real quick, that I'm really optimistic about the field of education. I think, there are issues with that we need to adapt education to these new tools, but I think also, they're very powerful and useful for democratizing education. Like I mentioned, I use them in my everyday work just to fill gaps in my knowledge. And I feel like I can go from 0 to 80% on a topic in a matter of minutes now. This is using models that are relatively cheap to run, and I think most people around the world will be able to afford.
I'll just give you some fun examples. So I've worked with social engagement robots for about 6 years now. Started with a focus on long-term care and senior homes just prior to COVID, actually. Kind of brought me hope and inspiration, because the robots now are getting so user-friendly and easy to use. So if you can, use a smartphone or a tablet, you can pretty much be a robot handler. That was not true, 10 or 15 years ago. And so the company that I'm with now, Global DWS, we have the largest deployment of social engagement robots in Canada in long-term care. And that is exciting to me. You've got staff who've never used robots before. You've got 85, 90, 95-year-old people who are playing trivia on the robot. And, I went in 2 weeks ago to do an upgrade on one of the robots to help the team. I don't usually do the tech stuff, but I was helping, just doing a customer visit, and I literally had to promise this lady that I would bring the robot back in 10 minutes. I just needed to take it away for a few minutes because I needed to give it, a medical checkup sort of thing. And it was wonderful, right? That people of all ages are able to embrace this technology now. It is so accessible, and I love the fact that we're able to bring AI and robotics into different sectors of our community and our society. So that gives me hope.
I'd like to just give another example, if I may. So the indigenous populations are using AI, particular language models that they develop themselves from the ground up for cultural preservation, language preservation, language revitalization projects. So these are initiatives that Connected Minds is also, for example, supporting. Connected Minds is very much advocating and pushing for the fact that we should be developing not just technologies in partnership with and for the most vulnerable among us, but we should also develop sort of guidelines and guardrails that allow anyone who wants to do any form of technological development or research to at least consider the societal implications and consequences, and hopefully mitigate some of the potential harm that could be done, especially to the most vulnerable of us.
Okay, last question.
Hello, just a question. I like I have a suggestion like we don't worry about like losing job. If everyone loses job, probably we don't need to work. But what we worry more about is safety. This is a question for Ghana. So in terms like computational neuroscience, is there anything we can learn from it to make AI model actually safer? Isn't it something we can learn from computational neuroscience that can help us to develop algorithms to make AI safer?
Yes, so one of the hopes of neuro AI from the AI side is to increase safety and trust of AI systems through better alignment to the human brain. So that is sort of like one of the big direction. And there's multiple ways that people think about it and how can that can be done. People have written about it. I don't think I have time to go into all the details. One aspect you can think of that came up earlier is like the empathy aspect, right? If a system somehow develops empathy, then they might do less harm and be therefore safer for the user. And then the question, of course, is like how does such a thing get empathy? And I don't know. I don't think anyone knows really, but maybe you know.
No, I was exactly. I was preparing something in case you guys raised that thing, empathy.
Oh, I see. But I mean, ultimately, like one way to, for example, I think one condition for humans and other animals to develop some form of empathy is suffering, right? So I have empathy because if you get hurt, I know what it might feel like for you, so I feel sorry for you, right? And I don't want you to get hurt because I know what it would feel like for me. And I also know that if society normalizes the fact that that anyone can hurt anyone else, that will eventually lead to harm for myself. So as a societal norm, that's also a bad thing, right? Machines don't know any of that stuff. They don't know the consequences. And that's in part why I think embodiment is important and potentially building in ways to safeguard, so like adding a risk component, that's my personal opinion, adding a risk component to the machines that enables something like empathy and therefore builds like a more sort of like a relationship with humans or other animals that allows it to care for the safeguard and preservation of those species.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's thank our debaters.